So I wanted to deliver an important message specifically at the end of Black History Month. Now this that I'm showing you is called the Doomsday Clock. And as you can see, it's saying that we are now 85 seconds to midnight. And midnight means doomsday. And that's why I have this message that's important, because Black history is actually tied to the end. Now, if you're totally unfamiliar with the Doomsday Clock, it's basically a global warning system that was created by leading scientists. It shows how close humanity might be to a major disaster, from threats like nuclear war, climate change, or dangerous technology, stuff like that. Every year, experts and Nobel Prize winning scientists review real-world data and world events to decide if global risk is increasing or decreasing. It doesn't actually give us an exact end date for when this event might happen, but it's designed to give us a easy to understand view based on professional judgment from highly qualified experts on how close we are to something actually happening. And if you believe in the Bible, then you know that when the end comes, there are a lot of horrific events that are supposed to happen, including a world war, a third world war that would be, of course. And we see what's going on, including what just happened in Israel recently. We see what's happening with ICE and what that looks like it could turn into, and a plethora of other things going on. And the other part of these events happening in the end is Christ returning as well. Now, most people will have you believe that who you are in the Bible doesn't matter, and all you have to do is everything that you've been currently learning at church, and you'll be fine when that time comes. But sadly, the Bible speaks very differently on both of those two matters. And that brings me to what I wanted to talk about with this Black history lesson. The first thing is, in the Bible, God says that at the end of time, he's going to have to replace the shepherds that have been in place and put new shepherds over his flock, because the shepherds that are in place around the time of the end times have been leading his flock astray. Now you can find that in Jeremiah 23, 1 through 8. And to make sure everything is in context, when you read this chapter, you'll see what I just said about the shepherds, and you'll see that he talks about Christ returning and being our king and ruler, so you know that this is talking about the end time. This is important because if the shepherds that have been leading us and guiding us that are in existence at the end time need to be replaced because they've been leading his flock away from him, then that would mean that those people that are the prominent leaders and shepherds currently, unless you don't believe we're close to the end times right now, then that means that the current shepherds that are here right now are the ones that need to be replaced. And it would sound crazy and not make sense, because everybody, of course, right now is going to believe that you're hearing everything that you need to hear. But according to this prophecy, whatever shepherds have been leading us on a major level, of course, right now, have been leading people away from what God said for us to do. Otherwise, he wouldn't say that they were leading his flock away. Now, the second thing in regards to the importance of who you are in the Bible, you can find that in Deuteronomy 30. And it tells us that whoever Israel is, they would remember who they are while they're scattered about, and then once they return to following God's laws, then Christ returns. That is a prerequisite to Christ returning. It doesn't say the Gentiles have to do this. In context, this is specifically talking about whoever Israel is. That specific group of people has to do this for Christ to return. So while none of us know the exact day or hour that the end events are going to start happening and Christ is going to return, we do have a prerequisite of what needs to happen in order for those things to start and for him to return, based off the scripture. And if I'm wrong about that, then I would like to know what this does mean here in Deuteronomy 30. Now, this has nothing to do with hating another group of people. This is about us realizing who we are within the Bible, so that these things that God said will happen get to happen. And there's absolutely no question that these things will happen, because his word does not come back to him void. And this is also about us understanding that we aren't, just slaves that came over here on a boat. We are actually a more significant people than most of us give ourselves credit for. And this is according to God. More importantly, this is about receiving salvation for you and your family before the events of the end happen. Because whether you believe what I'm saying or not, just remember, this clock is ticking down, and it's at 85 seconds to midnight now, and the last time they updated it, it was at 89 seconds. So that was last year. So it went down 4 seconds in 1 year. If this continued to go down for 4 seconds a year, that would mean that we only have about 22 years left before this event happens. And it could slow down, it could accelerate, we don't know. But the point is, the clock is ticking. And again, whether you believe what I'm saying or not, the prophecy says that us remembering who we were, which means we were supposed to forget who we were, And as we start going back to following God's laws, that is going to lead to the events of the end. And while you might choose to believe that you may not be a part of Israel and that you don't have to follow the laws, you know that there is a large and growing group of people that do believe that they are Israel and that are going back to following God's laws. And if the prophecy said that that is going to happen and it is going to trigger the events of the end to happen, it must mean that there is some number of people that he's waiting to hit before he blows that trumpet and has those events to start happening. So whether you get on board or not, that number is already increasing, and you don't know what number God is looking for or what people God is looking for to actually remember and go back to following him. But once it is hit, because it's already, as I'm saying, it's already increasing. So whether you're a part of that number or not, the number that God needs to hit is going to happen. And we all know by the time Christ gets here, it's going to be too late. So now, of course, I know I can't just say something like this and not show you proof. And instead of showing you, curses in Deuteronomy, which most of you guys are used to hearing, and you're probably desensitized to hearing that, and it means nothing to you in one ear out the other. So let's look at some current events and historical things that align with what I'm saying to you. So let's take a look at this. So we all know that there is already a group of people that identify themselves as being the people of the book, the Israelites. And we already know the location of Israel. So in that location, there is a law, and that law is called the Genetic Information Law. It was passed in 2000, and it governs who may perform DNA tests, under what circumstances, and in which accredited laboratories. So they have a law against who can get a DNA test and what laboratories they have to go to get those tests. Now, this is supposed to be about privacy of people's DNA and ancestry information, but it really seems like it's a little bit deeper than that. And when you look this up, in most instances, it'll say that, of course, it's not prohibited. It's just heavily regulated on how this works and who can get DNA tests. But I want you to see specifically what it's talking about so you're not misled in any information. So what is restricted? Direct-to-consumer ancestry kits like 23andMe. So basically, they can't be sold within Israel. You can't get your own DNA test in Israel. Paternity tests require a court order. So you can't get a paternity test without a court order. And identity-related tests, ancestry, lineage, familiar connection, they all fall under the same thing, that they can't be done without a court order. So again, heavily regulated on who can get a DNA test if you're in Israel. Now, why is this important? This is an interview that was done just a few days ago. I believe, right before we just had attacks, over there tied to Israel. But this is Tucker Carlson, and he did an interview with the U.S. ambassador that we have over there in Israel. Now, you should definitely check out this whole interview for yourself because there's some interesting stuff that they covered and talk about in here, including where he talks about in the beginning, the whole process of being able to go over there and do this interview. Very interesting. You should definitely listen to that. But he's talking to him about finding out who the actual descendants of Abraham are because it is tied to ownership of that land of Israel. As it mentions in Deuteronomy and in Jeremiah, the descendants being brought back to that land in the end time. So all of this ties in. It's all very important. So let's see what he says. And it's very interesting that he's so passionate and interested in getting to the bottom of, that is Tucker Carlson, getting to the bottom of who the actual descendants are. It's very crazy that he even cares about this. But let's see what he says.
Abram's descendants are the ones who have the right to have this land, correct? Yes. Okay. Why don't we do genetic testing on everybody in the land and find out who Abram's descendants are? It's really simple. We've cracked the human genome. We can do that. Why don't we do that? Would you be against doing that?
I have no idea what that would prove. I mean, maybe it would be.
What do you mean? It would prove who Abram's descendants are and who has a right to live here and who doesn't, according to the theology that you yourself just explained. And so I'm very confused as to why we don't do that. If you believe the theology that you've just explained to me.
Would we do that all over the world?
Well, this is the only country in the world that you've said has this covenant with God, that this people have a moral and legal right to the land.
What about people who convert to Judaism? Would they have a right?
Well, you've just said.
I mean, there are to Judaism, so
you just told me
they can make out. They may not have.
You've just
DNA.
told me that it doesn't matter. You told me moments ago, trying to keep track.
Okay.
That it doesn't matter whether or not you believe in God or whether or not you practice Torah Judaism or Rabbinic Judaism, which is something else that I don't even know if we should, I don't even know what that means. But it doesn't matter whether you're, quote, a religious Jew or not. What matters is that you are part of the Jewish people to whom God gave this land that extends from the Nile to the Euphrates. And so if you believe that, wouldn't you want to know with a burning passion who those people are? And because of science, we can now know who those people are. So why aren't we finding out?
Now, as you can see, he's just drilling in the question like, if Abraham's descendants have a right to this land, why don't we just do DNA tests, which I just showed you are heavily restricted there, and which is why part of why he's asking this question. Like, why don't we just do the DNA test to see if the people that are in this land are supposed to be there, and getting to the bottom of whoever Abraham's descendants are so that they can be in the land and get their ownership, their rightful ownership to the land.
A lot is at stake. A lot of money is at stake. Land is very valuable. Israel has a lot of resources. By the way, if you're accused of a crime, you can hide here. That's a pretty good passport to have. It's a good thing, right? So who's entitled to it? I don't understand, and you're very discouraged in the United States from asking this question for some reason. It's a totally rational.
I'm not discouraged.
No, you're not discouraged.
Yeah.
Others do. You're like the only person I can have this conversation with. And how do we know? So the current prime minister's ancestors weren't from here within recorded history. He has no deed. Bibi Netanyahu, on one side, his family's from Poland. They're from Eastern Europe. So how do we know that he has a connection to the people who God promised the land to, Abram's descendants? How do we know that?
Well, if you take the genealogies that come not only from the Old but the New Testament, you see that there is a historical connection through the entirety of the Old and the New Testament that details the Jewish connection to this land.
Does that include his family? How do we know that if his family
Well, they were
comes here?
scattered.
But how do we know it's the same people? No, why is that crazy?
So basically, as Tucker pointed out, it's a lot of valuable land that is at stake with whoever has the rightful claim to this land. And they talk about how, some of the people that are there don't have a known historical connection to being in that land. The current prime minister over there, Netanyahu, his family line doesn't even have a connection to the land, and yet he's over the entire land. And for some reason, Tucker just felt it very important to kind of get to the bottom of this question. And while it's, easy to kind of speculate on why he might be interested in this, even though it's not inherently obvious why he might care about something like that, I want you to remember that he also did an interview with Kanye West. And I know Kanye said some crazy things, but I must say that that's one of the least craziest things that he said. There was even a point in the interview with Kanye where Tucker said, "I see why they want to keep you quiet." Just go back and watch it. And there's also another interview that Tucker did with an entirely different person where he told that person he interviewed somebody unofficially and they mentioned Black Hebrew Israelites and how that was a hard concept to come to grips with. But both of those two things happened before we get to this recent interview where now he's pressing someone at a high level about why don't we find out who the real descendants are of Abraham. I don't know about you guys, but to me, when I see people at a high level like this, with him being a high level journalist and interviewer of high level figures, they get exposure to a lot of different people, different situations, and information that maybe we may not be privy to. And because of that, and because he likes to dig into real issues, it makes me think that he might also think that there is something to this. Even though, of course, it would be very unpolitically correct for him to say that that is the case in his position. Some things you just gotta kind of read between the lines. And now, let me show you this article. Now, so you understand, this article is something way back from 2005. This is not even available on the school's website anymore. And the school is the University of Southern Mississippi. But I had to go to the Wayback Machine, which is the only thing that will allow you to see a page that was up on a website way back in history. You can see at any point, any date, a page that was up and available on a website. So you wouldn't be able to Google this and find this on your own. Like I said, I had to go to the Wayback Machine website just to be able to find this particular article, which is now gone from the internet. Now, this is about a professor at the university, or he was a professor at the university. He not too long ago retired, but his name is Dr. Douglas Chambers, and he was also a historian, very credible, and he did a lot of work with the Igbo tribe. Now, for the most part, this article is about him, the professor, being made chief in Nigerian royal lineage by the Igbo tribe, because as I mentioned, he did a lot of work traveling over there, studying them, getting the history and all of that. Now, some of you may have heard that the Igbo tribe has connections with being a part of one of the tribes of Israel, and some of them practice to this day. And it is argued by some that it may not be the case, but I want you to see what this guy, who is a credible historian and did a lot of work and wrote books and did a lot of communication with this tribe. It says that Chambers, who is a graduate of the University of Virginia, said that he hopes his honor by the Igbo will encourage African Americans to find out more about their family histories. So he's hoping that his work will cause African Americans to go and look up your family histories. And then he says this. He says, "My research suggests that perhaps 60% of black Americans have at least one Igbo ancestor, he said. So, according to after doing all of the research that he did in personal hand-to-hand connection with this group of people, he believes that 60% of us black Americans have at least one Igbo ancestor, which would connect a lot of us to Israelite tribes if that is correct. In all fairness, we don't know how he exactly came to this conclusion, and it is something that could be debatable. But because he has so much first-hand knowledge, I lean on the side of wanting to believe what he said. And he's not even a black American himself, and he came to this conclusion. And he also said something else, which isn't a direct connection to anything, but it seems like a subliminal message that he kind of slid in to this article. And it says that the Igbo are one of the three principal ethnic groups of the most populous country in sub-Saharan Africa. And Nri is the Jerusalem of the Igbo. Now, why did he mention, that city is the Jerusalem of the Igbo? I mean, he could have said something different. He could have said a different place. But, that seems like just something he slid in there extra without trying to say too much. But I don't know. You be the judge of that. And I know some of this stuff can just seem like something crazy to believe because it's contrary to everything that we know and have been taught. But I want to point something out. Remember back when Kyrie posted a documentary that he caught complete hell for and pretty much almost lost his whole legacy, his career, even though at the time he was ready to stand 10 toes down initially on him posting the documentary. And when he posted it, he didn't even say it was right, it was wrong. He just posted it until he kept getting continuous backlash and started to see just how deep it was about to get over him simply posting a documentary. Then he ended up being very remorseful, which led to him apologizing publicly and having to complete 6 action items just to get his job back and to get his life back to normal. And I can only imagine what things happened behind the scenes that we didn't know about. But the fact that they did this to Kyrie and tried to punish him so publicly and take everything away from him, being a black man with a high notoriety, a lot of people know him, and sharing something that would make other people believe that they might be actual Israelites connected to the people in the Bible. Why is it that he had to catch so much backlash for saying that? If he would have posted a Muslim documentary, they wouldn't have did that. If he would have posted an African spiritual documentary, they wouldn't have did that. If he would have posted any of the other things that most people believe, this would not have happened to him. And it reminds me of Black Wall Street. We all know what happened, but we were all not focused on trying to hurt anybody else. We were just thriving, building with each other, and our community saw the benefits from that at a great extent. And the people that were against us at that time saw what was happening, even though no one was bothering them, and decided that, hey, we need to come and shut this down. Fires, bombs, attacking people, just to shut down something that they saw was actually going to be beneficial for the black community. There was no other reason to attack it other than the fact of not wanting something like that to happen. Like when you see something that you feel like is going to be a threat, you're going to want to attack it. But also, looking at it from a different side, when a group of people that you want to keep at a certain level, keep at a certain position, are doing the right thing, then it's going to trigger you to want to go and stop them from doing something that is in the right direction that's going to actually be beneficial. And most people think that attack just stopped everything, and that's why Black Wall Street did not continue. But they actually started rebuilding Black Wall Street. What people don't know is that when desegregation happened, that's when Black Wall Street actually fell for good, even though they had started to rebuild it. Because at that point, it was realized that instead of just attacking what we were doing at that time, they realized that, hey, you're going to get opposition if we continue to attack. So they opened up the door for us to make our own decision for self-destruction, which was spending money with everybody else but ourselves, which caused the decline of all of the benefits that we were getting from operating in the way that we did during Black Wall Street, having black-owned businesses, hiring black employees, shopping black with the black-owned businesses, all of those things that help any community become stronger. And by doing things in that way, they didn't have to fight against us. We self-destructed on our own, and of course, we know the economic status that the majority of black people carry today. I said that to say that basically, if someone does not want you to know something, or they don't want you to do something that would actually move you in the right direction, and they are against you, they will attack, just like they did at Black Wall Street, just like they did Kyrie for what he said, just like they did Kanye when he started saying the same thing. These aren't just random instances that are only what we see on the surface. There are instances where somebody is doing something that would actually move us in the right direction, and the goal is to shut anything like that down. And to make you think things like it's not important who you are in the Bible so that you willingly, just like when desegregation happened, you willingly ignore what could possibly lead to the right direction. But here's the thing, it's more groups that are a part of God's chosen people than just African Americans. Let me show you this book. This book is called Lost Tribes and Promised Lands by Ronald Sanders. This is the author right here. You can get this book at Target, Amazon, eBay, wherever you can find it. In this book, he talks about a few different things, but one scenario that is specifically important is about a guy named Antonio Montezenos, and he gave a testimony on the interaction he had with a Seminole Indian. Now, this is all around the 1600s, right? So the Indians that he encountered, he says, not only spoke Hebrew, they also quoted different parts from the Bible and called themselves descendants of tribes of Israel, as well as pointing out people from other tribes that were on islands not too far from there as well. So I know there are some of you guys that don't believe we came over here in slave ships at all, and you guys believe that we were already here in America. I wouldn't say that the slave ship thing didn't happen, but based on information like this and other information within the Bible and outside it, it appears that the tribes from the northern kingdom, after being released from Assyrian exile, came over here, and that is where the native Indians come from. So still part of the chosen people, but they just came over here earlier, which would explain what Antonio saw. And also, check this out. There's an article on 800 ancient stones with Hebrew writing in Puerto Rico. It's a little bit of question in the air on if they're authentic or not, but these are only like a few things. There are several other things outside of curses in the Bible that show why things like Tucker Carlson was asking are important to figure out who Abraham's descendants really are. Now look, I know when I encounter most people that say they know something about a Hebrew Israelite, they ran into one or they've just seen stuff online, usually it's something negative that they say that they experienced or that they saw. And let me say this, just like there are different denominations within Christianity where there are different beliefs and different ways of operating on certain matters within the Bible, the same thing applies to Hebrew Israelites. There are what you would call a different denomination with different beliefs on different matters within the Bible. Not all of them are filled with hate. Not all of them are bad people. While there might be some within this community, it's the same thing on the side of Christianity, and you all know this. Whether it's not outwardly yelling at somebody, or there are just different ways of doing other devious things in the Christianity side of things. So let's not act like all of the people within one belief system are extremely bad, because we know that's not true. There are bad people in every organization, in every company, as well as under different belief systems. And again, this isn't about hating anybody. What this is about is understanding who you are in the Bible, because according to God, his chosen people need to remember who they are, start following his laws again before this clock runs out. And mind you, also in the Bible it says that the majority of people are not going to make it. Specifically, 2/3 of people. You saw what I mentioned about God saying that he was going to need to replace the shepherds that have been leading us. And if those shepherds are the shepherds in place now, that means that the majority of people are following something that is leading them away from God, as the scripture says. And that's all going to be addressed at the end of time, which we are close to. So please take what I said, do your own research, and understand that just because we have known a thing or done a thing or operated in a certain way for a long time does not mean that that is the right way or the God way.